A quick tutorial about compositing in Photoshop. Now, if you don't know what compositing means, it basically just means combining one image with another, and that can be either moving images or still images. I think it's really useful, especially if you're a stop motion filmmaker, because there are some things that will take hours to build that can literally be done in seconds if you have a basic grasp of compositing. So I'm using Photoshop here, but all of these general principles will still work in After Effects, except After Effects is really designed for moving images rather than still images. So the example I'm using here is a shot from my first year film. I have this shot of a nice clean billboard. Later in the film I show the same billboard again, but 30 years later when it's been abandoned and covered in bird shit and cracks and grime and graffiti. Now, in order to blend two images together, the main thing we need to think about is which part of the image we want to be transparent and which part of the image we want to be opaque. There are really only three techniques I use to do this. There's masking, there's screen mode, and then there's multiply mode. So the first example is masking. I have here this image of exposed bricks underneath some paint. And I want to make it so that these bricks show through, but the paint doesn't. So doing that's quite simple. All I have to do is use the magic wand tool, select these out, and then click this little button here that will add a mask. Now you could just do this by rasterizing the layer and then just going in with an eraser and sort of hacking away at it. But the problem with this is once you've erased something, if you do it destructively like this, then there's no way to get back the pixels that you've lost. So it's not a very wise way of working. So I always recommend, as much as possible, try and work with masks rather than just deleting the pixels. Okay. Get my magic wand tool. Select these again. You can see here that that's actually done the opposite of what I want, because it's hidden the bricks and it's showing the paint. So in order to reverse this, we just click on the mask, press Command I, which will invert the mask. And you see the black and the white have switched over. You want to make sure you've got the mask selected rather than the image itself. If I select the image, you can see it's inverted the image rather than the mask. And let's undo that. Okay, so this technique of masking will work very well for some things, but it can be quite time consuming, especially if you've got a lot to mask out. But luckily that's not the only way of making things transparent. You can also use multiply mode. And what multiply does is basically it makes it so that all the black pixels will be opaque, and all the white pixels will be transparent, and anything in between will be somewhere in between. So if it's 50% grey, then it's going to show through about 50%. You can see that works fairly nicely, but it's kind of darkened the image sort of uniformly. What we want is to only darken the image where it's cracked. So if I press Command L, bring up my levels panel, And this is just a more fine-grained way of adjusting the brightness and contrast. And by doing that, you can just adjust it so that the dark bits show through and the texture of the wall is completely transparent. And you can see there's still quite a hard edge here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a mask to that. Get a nice large soft brush. Set the colour of my brush to black. And now, since I've got the mask selected, this allows me to sort of smooth out the transition. I can always go back, switch my brush to white if I want to add some of it back. If we hold down Alt and click on the mask, that'll show us what we're actually doing. If we click back, it'll go back to the final image again. Okay, right. Now the opposite of multiply mode is screen mode. Now it does the exact same thing, but in reverse. So instead of hiding the white pixels, it hides the black pixels, and the white pixels will show through. Just going to drag this back so it's behind all the other stuff. Just adjust that so it's in the right place. And I'm going to do the same thing I did before. Press Command L. And then just adjust the levels. Now if I just switch that back to normal mode and actually see what we're doing. You can see I'm just pushing and pulling it, and this will change what shows through and what doesn't. Okay, that's a bit too harsh. But anyway, you get the idea. Let's say I want to add some graffiti. In order to do that, I'm actually just going to rasterize this. I'm going to select the bit I want to select. Just delete the rest. Just paste that onto a new layer, delete that. And then I can do the same thing here. Just put that into screen mode. And you can see that gives me some transparent graffiti that I can lay over the top of this. And then again, I'm going to want to just adjust the levels so that the graffiti shows through but everything else is transparent. But I might actually want to have this be black on white instead of white on black. So I'm actually going to invert that. Change the blend mode to multiply. And now I have some black graffiti. I can just drag that into place. And maybe I want to change the color of that. So I can add a hue saturation adjustment. Set the mode to colorize. Then if I fiddle around with this a bit. I can make it red or whatever colour I want to make it. The other thing you'll want to do is you'll just want to adjust the original images so that they match the tone and the colour of your original photo. So you don't want the textures to be much more high contrast than the rest of the image, otherwise they'll look quite fake. You also want to fiddle around with the hue just so that it matches the general colour and saturation of the rest of your image.